Hey everyone, this is Paul Gale from paulgalenetwork.com, and thank you for joining me today for Video Game Talk. It is March 3rd, 2022, and today's video is all about the Nintendo Switch and it's celebrating turning 5. Yes, it's the 5th anniversary. Hard to believe. Half a decade has passed, right? Since March 3rd, 2017, when Nintendo very successfully had a worldwide, simultaneous, truly global launch of Nintendo Switch, 1-2 Switch, and The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. This came at a really important time in Nintendo's life because the Nintendo 3DS was already starting to see its age. It came out 6 years prior, had a lot of success, sold really well, had a lot of good quality pieces of software on it. Never quite reached the sales success hardware or software wise as the DS, but was a good system for what it was. Brought forth brand new technology with that 3D stereoscopic 3D coming off the screen without the use of glasses. Very cool. Wii U was, a 6 year later released console successor to Wii. And despite me having a lot of fun with it for the 4 years and 4 months or so that it was out before Nintendo Switch came out, it was a failure for Nintendo. Sad to say. It moved fewer than 14 million units worldwide, becoming Nintendo's easily worst selling system of all time. Side note, Virtual Boy did more poorly, but if you discount Virtual Boy, Nintendo's main consoles, yeah, Wii U did not do very well. It had a strong attach rate, though, of games sold to console owners out there. Stuff like Mario Kart 8, Super Mario 3D World, those did well. Super Smash Bros. For Wii U, another good one. It had its fair share of exclusive third-party software on it, at least third-party exclusive software for a while, like Zombie U and the Wonderful 101, which eventually would get ported. But things like Bayonetta 2 only came out on Wii U until it got ported to Nintendo Switch. But you know what I mean. For what it was, it received still some third-party software that was exclusive, some ports. It kind of came out at a weird time, and it was a bit of a mistake in a few areas. I always wonder this what if type of scenario. Like, what if Wii U came out 2 years earlier, right? November 2010, when Wii U was peaking after 4 years of being on the market before it started to really take a dive, and PlayStation 4 and Xbox One wouldn't come out until November 2013. And let's say Wii U was what it was, just without the gamepad, just a more powerful Wii that was able to capitalize on the third-party games that were coming out across the board, like Grand Theft Auto 4, Street Fighter 4, Mortal Kombat Revival, Tomb Raider, Final Fantasy 13, Assassin's Creed, all of these big IP that were coming out, booming during the Wii, PlayStation 3, Xbox 360 era, but with those franchises missing out on Wii because of the lack of power and the lack of drive for developers to make a whole other SKU from the ground up for many of these entries. Sometimes you saw it with something like Call of Duty, but oftentimes games missed out a version on Wii. We saw it with Ghostbusters and stuff like that. We saw it with something unique like Tatsunoko vs. Capcom on Wii, where we did not get Street Fighter 4 that came out on the other two. But imagine, if you will, Wii U coming out in 2010, same hardware, no gamepad, a regular controller, also backwards compatible. How would that have done? Because then you would have had the most powerful console on the market, clearly, for 3 whole years. Wii U came out, it was stronger than Xbox 360 and PS3, but it was only the strongest system on the market for a year, and the hype was already there for PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, which would come out a very short 12 months later, being drastically more powerful. And then once again, having the scenario where Wii U, as the first 8th gen home console, isn't going to last in the world of PlayStation 4 and Xbox One exclusives not being able to run on that, right? The name was probably a mistake in hindsight. I said it I had a conversation at a few early E3s with friends at Nintendo that I would kind of recommend the name change, but they were sold on it. They did consider at a time maybe not having it Wii U, maybe something else, but they went with that. Not the clearest signals from the get-go of what the gamepad was. Was it an attachment for the console, for the Wii? Was this just Wii, now portable? It was a mistake. But what we got out of it was a little bit of a glimpse of what was to come. This 6-inch screen that allowed you to play current generation home console quality titles, not just on your TV, but portably. Still within the confine of your home. You could only be oh so many feet away from your system, more or less, with walls in between. Wood, the gamepad did not like traveling through wood, its signals, for instance. So it wasn't just amount of length, but also what was constructed in between. But you could see that as the precursor to Nintendo Switch. If you were a Wii U owner, you still were getting quality titles. Some of them were ports of older games like Batman Arkham City, for instance, but you were still getting some new modern things as they came out, like Injustice. Maybe not the full versions of them, not the full DLC, but from Nintendo software standpoint, Star Fox Zero, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, Pikmin 3, it was hard to complain that if you were a Nintendo fan, you were still enjoying, Legend of Zelda Wind Waker remake, Twilight Princess remake. These are good games that came out. Some new, some ported. Xenoblade Chronicles X, brand new title, right? So the Wii U wasn't all doom and gloom. Like I said, if you were a fan, an owner of the system, probably you were having a good time. But I feel like the world needed Nintendo Switch. This was that revolution in gaming. Once in a while you have evolutions in gaming. Those actually happen more often, right? NES to Super Nintendo, N64 to GameCube, PlayStation 4 to PlayStation 5. These are the evolutions. 2D to better 2D, 3D to better 3D. But sometimes you have that revolution, like Super Nintendo to Nintendo 64, 3D polygon graphics from 2D, 3D camera operated movements instead of not, analog stick control, 360 fine motion, more freedom, rumble technology. These are enough to consider it a revolution. GameCube to Wii. I think Wii deserves a lot of credit, and some people give it credit, and some people kind of don't. But motion controls implemented in games, bringing video games to more people than ever before. People that might not have been able to play. Maybe they had cerebral palsy or multiple sclerosis, something that prevented them from having very fine tuned motor controls with finger dexterity. Now a simpler motion got to play. That was one of Nintendo's, designs in the Wii, was how do we break this stagnation, because you're only going to get oh so many more new people playing per generation and people dropping off. How do you drop something that's explosive in the video game community to please video game fans and bring new people or lapsed people into gaming? And that's what Wii was. It still had compelling software for the hardcore. It still had classic titles, which it brought forth in Virtual Console. And no one's going to complain about Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 and The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess and Mad World and Super Smash Bros. Brawl and Muramasa Demon Blade, all great games. But Wii was underpowered, so it missed out in other areas. But still, at the end of the day, it was a revolution. You saw motion controls adopted by competitors with Kinect, with Move, And I think that Nintendo Switch is that next revolution. It brought forth completely current, modern console gaming, more so than Wii U did, into a complete designated handheld package that wasn't tethered, that wasn't limited to the TV. Didn't have to be close to this dock or this console. It was the console. It came with the intention of being your home console that you could play on TV, parity to other games of the 8th generation, but also so far ahead of the 8th generation in terms of handheld gaming, making it the first 9th gen console. If you look at Nintendo's lineage, console generations are defined by time, by power increase, by software with compelling differences that weren't available on prior systems, and new forms of technology being implemented. You could say that Nintendo Switch isn't as powerful as PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, which are 8th generation systems that came out with Wii U, but Nintendo Switch is capable of playing these 8th gen games, doing so portably, and not just playing those games, but lasting into those two systems' successors' lives, PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series S and X, and playing new modern games that are coming out on those platforms on this Nintendo Switch. But more importantly than what it could play, kind of, and the timing, because the timing, it did come out kind of halfway between PS4, Xbox One, and PS5, Xbox Series, is what did it bring to gaming that wasn't able to be done before? And that is this dual nature setup. In this console right here, if you take off the Joy-Con, you truly see how small it is. This brought forth a whopping PS4 and Xbox One sense of power. Now you could say, yeah, it's a lot less powerful, but when you're playing something like Doom, and you look at the size of the machine that is necessary to play Doom 2016, and you're playing it on Nintendo Switch, and new game that comes out like Dragon Ball Fighter Z and Mortal Kombat 11. Some of the games that I'm mentioning, there's a little bit greater of a graphical and performance disparity. Some titles, no, it looks like of equal parity, right? And you're getting these beautiful games that are, indie titles, but that are highest of quality, like Hollow Knight and Hades. And then you're seeing all these modern titles are coming out in the form factor of the Nintendo Switch. This thing isn't just a home console that out of the box was able to be played on TV, but a handheld in your hand. It was actually so advanced that when you played it in tabletop mode, perhaps that's people's least played mode, I think, in terms of overall people, but maybe not. But when you think of the power of what the system was from a tabletop mode perspective, not even Steam Deck quite offers that out of the box. You prop this system up on its kickstand, which got evolved later on thanks to the Nintendo Switch OLED, and it now serves as a TV, a power outlet source that you would connect to the wall, a self-sufficient HDMI cable of a home console plugged into the TV, and a portable wireless controller or two when held horizontally, all in one. That's enough of a propulsion in technology forward into what these other systems could not do that make it the first 9th gen console. The HD Rumble, something brand new, fine rumble motors interlaced throughout the controller that when you shook that controller, that Joy-Con and 1-2 switch, you could feel the marbles rolling inside. You could feel vibration curve along this side, curve along that side. Better motion control than ever before. With this IR blaster, you got things like night vision with its own night vision game app on the system. You could see this technology and this camera from Nintendo Labo VR and the rumble motors being so fine that you could make this cardboard construct move. Nintendo Labo VR was a success as it did sell a few million copies between, the various versions. And when you throw in Nintendo Labo VR, that's one more thing that Labo did right. Cheap, affordable, virtual reality. Nintendo's intention wasn't a full-on deep dive with a head strap and, plastic and going around your eyes and this and this. It was shorter term, but it's still out of the box, with the exception of, one more little piece of cardboard to make it necessary, almost out of the box in that case, to be honest, an entry point into VR. So you really look at what it did from that modern gaming standpoint, also on the go. in this little machine. Its tabletop mode, the form factor, the HD rumble, the fact that you have games in 2020 coming out that are able to exist on a cartridge and be played off of the medium itself. That's something that hasn't been able to be done by the competition since PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. You realize that? Think about that for a moment. Your physical discs for Xbox One, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, and Xbox Series X all require you to load them onto the system to eat up your hard drive space of that 50 gigs, 80 gigs, whatever that's on the disk, and have the disk running at the same time. And Nintendo Switch, it's able to play these games off of the cartridge itself, very seldomly needing you to download a file. Now, that's not really the hardware fault. That comes more along the lines with the software developer, the publisher. Do they want to have a 32 gigabyte cartridge, or do they want to have a smaller cartridge and kind of split up the data between, what's downloadable required to get the full experience and what's on the cartridge? Kind of like Doom, where the Doom 2016 game, which came out on 2017 for Nintendo Switch, had its multiplayer modes on digital that you had to download to get versus cartridge, just the main game and stuff like that. But that's not, the hardware limitation fault. So hardware-wise, it is more advanced than the other systems in some regards, and still has an edge over PS5 and Xbox Series X, which came out later. But, I don't mean to make this too much of a whole ninth generation kind of talk thing, but part of that talk was necessary because that's the impressiveness that was Nintendo Switch. That's that shake-up in the video game industry that you need once in a while. Sometimes you need that analog stick. You need that wireless tech, like what the Wavebird brought, in a new way. Even though the GameCube wasn't a revolutionary console, the Wavebird itself, counted as a revolution in video game control. That motion control, that touchscreen control. If you think about it, was DS a revolutionary console? Well, it did a lot more than what Game Boy Advance did. It brought two screens. It brought touch control. Eventually, you're getting camera support on these things. 3DS, stereoscopic 3D. Nintendo's always been this awesome pioneer of technology, and I always applaud them for it. It's one of the reasons why they're my favorite video game developer, because in addition to making software that I love, like Mario and Zelda, and being a part of Pokemon, Donkey Kong, Kirby, Kid Icarus, Smash Brothers, Mario Kart, Animal Crossing, Pikmin, Star Fox, the list goes on and on, right? F-Zero, we're going into Golden Sun territory, and Xenoblade now, and like I said, it's just a wonderful company in terms of games, but hardware, innovation, design, the willingness to risk and sometimes be more successful than others, oftentimes set the stage for others to emulate, copy, however you want to say it, steal, and really set the stage. Nintendo's not always the first. They didn't adopt HD right away. That kind of hurt them a little bit. That would have helped them more. That's one of the things if Wii U came out sooner, because third-party developers, Microsoft internally, if you think about it, they were making third-party games. They were making first-party games. They were developing in HD for Xbox 360. They had that HD development mindset in 2003, and Sony as well, 2003 or 4 for PlayStation 3's launch. Nintendo really didn't start HD development kind of till like 2010 to get ready for Wii U in 2012. Nintendo missed 7 years of learning how to develop HD. For as talented as they were, they fell behind in terms of, oh shoot, HD development takes up a lot more time and resources and energy and money. And that's kind of one of the reasons why Wii U had its decent lapses in games that came out first party. But like I said, Wii U had other issues too, but that was one of them. Now you saw a much more mature, much stronger Nintendo, kind of closer to their past selves in terms of the output. And that's one of the most important things, and one of the things I think they did the best with Nintendo Switch is the level of output. Starting off with The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, such a strong, powerful, wonderful game. It became my new favorite game of all time, and that's saying a lot because to take over Ocarina of Time, to take over some of these other top best games of all time, to still go back and play it 5 years later and have fun in that world, and being able to reach onto ledges, have this true sense of freedom in, above, under, across, ground, how tight the dynamics are in the game, how tight the gameplay is, how smooth of an experience it is, how wonderful the game's in real world geometry and physics engines are. Plus the music and the graphics and the level of variety in the worlds that you're exploring in the title. You know, very few things are things that I was like, that could have done better. Like the four main dungeons having a different visual quality to them instead of them all being kind of brownish and stuff like that. And some more variety in those four bosses. But if you take those things away, you look at what it did, voice acting on a whole nother level, you know, cinematography, cinema scenes actually in the game on a whole nother level, you know, music, having its share of music, but also not this one looping soundtrack that's going on over this whole world. Things were designed in such an intelligent way. Yeah, it really, you know, became my favorite game of all time. And you look at just the output, very, very cleverly, never having a gap. You know, you would release something new like ARMS, but you would also have something like Mario Kart get ported via Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. You'd have something new like Super Mario Odyssey and, you know, Fire Emblem Three Houses, but you'd have ports of Bayonetta 1 and 2 and Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. You'd be releasing new stuff along the way and stuff from Wii U that had a new life to live, you know, and some titles from Wii, like Xenoblade Chronicles, the first one. Then you'd have Xenoblade Chronicles 2, although they came out in opposite order. And just overall, still maintaining solid third-party relationships. This is the best third-party Nintendo console in a long time. And I mean that from the third-party perspective of, you know, bigger named publishers. You're getting the likes of Mortal Kombat 11, you're getting Doom, you're getting, Diablo 2 and Diablo 3 that also came out, you know, in that opposite way, because 2 was a remake and 3 came first to Nintendo Switch. And you're having some surprises, Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle. Then you're getting announcements in the future that we have things yet to look forward to. Bayonetta 3 coming out. Metroid Prime 4. We've got Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild's sequel coming out. You get ports throughout the ways still, so there's never a complete gap. Pokken Tournament, Super Mario 3D World. Sometimes you get a bonus like Bowser's Fury. Sometimes it's a little bonus that's still significant, like in Pikmin 3 Deluxe with its 2-player mode. New title coming out soon, Kirby and the Forgotten Land. The first console to get something that later on gets ported to PC, like Monster Hunter Rise, Fire Emblem Three Houses, Fire Emblem Warriors, soon to be another Fire Emblem Warriors Three Hopes game. New Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, port of Hyrule Warriors that came out on Wii U. This really good balance, this really awesome flow. Every single quarter has been a success in the last 5 years that Nintendo Switch has been out. Every fiscal year is doing better and better in some regards. You know, it's not like every single one is going up in hardware, but software wise it is. You know, hardware, we probably had our peak hardware year in 2020, but maybe not, right? Maybe Nintendo does a Nintendo Switch Plus or something like that, and then in that year we see Nintendo Switch Plus the Nintendo Switch OLED model and the Nintendo Switch Lite and the Nintendo Switch base model, all, you know, gathering up and being the best-selling Nintendo Switch, you know, hardware year to date. But software-wise, that's where we are seeing that continuous growth, and I think 2022 is going to be the best Nintendo Switch software year to date. You know, we have so many evergreen titles. the system has yet to have a long-term, permanent software price drop via player's choice lineup, you know? Imagine when they eventually get to, okay, these launch games, these games that have been out for 6+ years, like Super Mario Odyssey, Breath of the Wild, all that kind of stuff, they're now always at $30 or $20. Wow, that's going to move some more. You know, imagine when they get to the point where, all right, Nintendo Switch drops from 300 to 250, Nintendo Switch Lite goes from 200 to 170, Nintendo Switch OLED goes from 350 to 300, and then we got the Nintendo Switch Plus that debuted at 400, significantly more powerful. Or perhaps that system never comes out and we have a few more years of life left, and then the Nintendo Switch 2 comes out. And then you have this like 400, 300, 250, 160 level. I've always said, I think just the absolute bare minimum guarantee that Nintendo Switch does is 140 million units sold worldwide, and software sales definitely over a billion. I think it will hit 1 billion by March 31st, 2024, and very likely it will be a billion before then, but that's my opinion on the latest. I think the system also goes on to topping DS, and for that matter, topping PlayStation 2, and ends up selling at least 160 million. Well, I said 140 at the least, like bare minimum, but 160 is my next level of realistic, I think, like still realistic. Depending on how Nintendo does things, it could even be a 210 million seller. Now, I've said that multiple times over the last almost 5 years now, but the reason why? Well, it's taking their hardware division and software division, their home console and their portable console, they're wrapping everything in one under one roof. It's strong enough to be playing other titles. It has a lot of support coming in from a lot of different types of gamers. It has yet to have like that giant price drop. Do you realize that the PlayStation 2 came out in 2000 for $300? 3 years after the PlayStation 3 came out in 2006, so in 2009, the PS2 dropped to $100. And all of these systems, by the way, Nintendo GameCube, Xbox, PlayStation 2, PS3, Xbox 360, Wii, Super Nintendo, NES, Nintendo 64, did I mention Nintendo GameCube, DS, Game Boy Advance, DS Lite, 2DS, 3DS, all of these consoles and everything else have all had permanent console price drops in less than 5 years' time. Nintendo Switch has yet to finally have its full worldwide designated long run price drop. And that's not even like the giant price drop, because that usually happens tail end of a console's life. Imagine, and it's kind of hard to think like, geez, when's that day going to come? But imagine when the Nintendo Switch Lite is out there not just for like 160, 170, but 100 or 80. If Nintendo keeps the manufacturing lines open and gets it down, the Nintendo Switch that is, to where they can still be making a profit at 100 or 80 bucks, then that system becomes like a, oh geez, time goes on, parents have second kids or third kids, or sometimes things break, or sometimes you want to evolve to an OLED model this, more maturity there, so you deserve the higher quality system. Let's give that old system or buy another system for a cousin, donate this one, buy the new model, whatever. There's this whole other market that wouldn't necessarily buy a Nintendo Switch Lite, despite it being pretty affordable at 200 and buying these awesome games at 60, but would definitely buy a Nintendo Switch Lite at 80 or 100, and these awesome first party games at 20 or 30 bucks a pop. You get to that point, then the tail end becomes exponentially longer. You get the base Nintendo Switch, this designated home console and handheld and tabletop platform, to $200 to $150. These prices seem like, no way, that's too cheap. But GameCube, PS2, all of these systems, Xbox, Dreamcast, they all eventually get to that low of a price. Nintendo right now has these tremendous profit margins because for the entirety of these 5 years, they've been able to sell the Nintendo Switch at $300 USD. They've been able to sell these games at $60 MSRP, you know, and that's really cool. And I'm proud of them because they are selling a good quality product. Is there some Joy-Con drift? Yes. Have Joy-Con drifts been maybe exaggerated? Probably. I don't think that out of the 103.54 million Nintendo Switch owners out there that all of them are experiencing this horrible Joy-Con drift all within a few months. No. Is a fair percentage of them experiencing it and a little bit more experiencing it after several more months, after a couple more years? Yeah, that's probably likely. But you see with the Valve Steam Deck, you see with the PlayStation 5 DualSense controller, you see with other controllers, unfortunately, things happen. That's not necessarily an out for just Nintendo, but it is definitely something to look forward to for Nintendo's next system, the next iteration of the Joy-Con or whatever type of analog control they implement in their next controller to do better, to make it better. But overall, Nintendo has built a very smart system, and that magic still feels alive despite the hardware being 5 years old. Is the graphical difference starting to show more and more between, modern day Nintendo Switch games, Pokemon Legends Arceus, and Horizon Forbidden West? Yes, Nintendo Switch was already less capable, visually speaking, than Xbox One and PS4 a few years ago, but the difference wasn't as great. I was playing Doom here, and then Doom on my Xbox One X, and I'm like, gosh, the Nintendo Switch version looks really good, and I'm not at all disappointed between the two. By Mortal Kombat 11, I'm like, okay, this one definitely looks different. It's a different build. And then now with Pokemon Legends Arceus and Horizon Forbidden West, I'm like, okay, the level of detail is staggering running on my PS5 and on my Nintendo Switch. But you know what? Doesn't really matter. So far, now I have yet to beat Horizon Forbidden West, and I just beat Pokemon Legends Arceus last week, but I like overall Pokemon Legends Arceus more. It's the better, more fun game for me personally. But then again, that's 50 hours of play versus 7 hours of play. So I've yet to see which is truly the better game. But regardless of which one's better, there are two different types of good. They're both very good games. So Nintendo Switch is not like on its tail end where it's releasing that kind of software at the end of its life. No, it's still releasing like, this is awesome game. I'm having as much fun with Arceus now as I did with, Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle almost 5 years ago. Like, that's the kind of stuff. And we have Sparks of Hope. Speaking of, Mario and Rabbids coming out. And, just so many things are coming out that are equal, like the upcoming, Shredder's Revenge, probably going to be of equal performance and stuff like that. And that's something that, I would rather own on Nintendo Switch because I can also play it portably. And that's a big difference maker. Same with Streets of Rage 4. I played it on my Xbox One X and eventually Xbox Series X, thanks to Game Pass, but I bought it physically, that edition, for Nintendo Switch because, Streets of Rage 4 is fun to have portably too. So, what's my takeaway in all this? It still feels like a very magical system. And with such awesome software coming out within the next year, I absolutely can't wait till Bayonetta 3 drops. It's good. It's one of my most anticipated games of this year. And I know that by the time it comes out, I will probably also be experiencing God of War Ragnarok. And the level of graphic difference is going to be night and day. And future titles like Spider-Man 2, Perfect Dark, Wolverine are going to look better from a 4K polygon depth of field perspective, resolution, all that stuff, than The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 or Metroid Prime 4. But you know what? Those two games I am more hyped for than anything else out there, and that's on Nintendo System, and exclusive on Nintendo System. Now, some people might not like every genre or every franchise that Nintendo brings, that Nintendo makes, but if you are an overall fan of Nintendo, Nintendo Switch has given you 5 great years, I think. More hours played, more software played on this system than my Xbox One, PS4, PS5 so far, and Xbox Series X so far. And I played a lot of Wii U too. You know, I think my total, if I'm not mistaken, was like 2,500 hours of play on it, with like 1,300 being Netflix, Hulu, YouTube, and 1,200 being designated games. And most of those games were played in those first 4 years, maybe some into year 5, but at that point, it was already going to like November 2017. Nintendo Switch already out for 8 months, less and less Wii U time. But still, if you're looking at like, all right, 1,200 hours or so of playing Wii U in, let's call it 5 years, that's quite a bit of time for gaming. But you're looking at the Nintendo Switch software report that Nintendo gives out each year, and like, I'm playing more Nintendo Switch than I am Wii U. I'm playing quite a bit of Xbox One and PS4, PS5, Xbox Series X, but still more Nintendo Switch on the year. So we'll see how 2022 goes. But from a software perspective, looking at these 3 consoles, this thing right here, or these guys right here, they still feel like very much a modern console. And that's because it is. It still is. It is a 9th gen system. It wouldn't be getting this type of heavy hitting software lineup if it wasn't. Doesn't really matter. Okay, it came out 3 years and 4 months after these systems, and 3 years and 8 months before these systems, and it's a Gen 8.5 and stuff. You know what? Who cares? If you want to call it 8, go for it. If you want to call it 8.5, go for it. If you want to call it a 9, go for it. I call it a 9. I fully believe that it is 9. I can see why some people say, oh, this or that, but you got to look at it. I'm going back to my generation talk. Is it a propulsion and technology going forward? Does it do what other systems can't? Did it pioneer something new that others adopted? HD Rumble, DualSense Rumble. Time-wise, is it a successor of Nintendo's own lineage of console release? Yes. If anything, pay respect to your elders. Nintendo's been around the longest. If Wii U and 3DS were Gen 8, and Wii and DS were Gen 7, and GameCube and Game Boy Advance were Gen 6, and Nintendo 6 was 5, and Super Nintendo and Game Boy was 4, and NES was 3, and I'm going backwards in time. And if Game & Watch was 2 and Color TV was 1, then guess what? Come back 40 years later and Nintendo Switch is 9. Okay? So it's not like, oh, Nintendo has to follow this line of console numerical generation based stuff based off of PS and Xbox because they're number based. At least PlayStation is, and Xbox is, designated console based. Xbox 360 came out 4 years after Xbox. That was a very short gen. It was a new console. The distance in time between Dreamcast and Saturn was significant, but that's still a next gen. Doesn't really matter. It's the next generation, folks. So yeah, Nintendo Switch, Nintendo being the oldest, relevant, still consistently producing console generator out there, they're the ones that get to determine the era, the generation. They don't have to be first, they don't have to be last, but how come people don't look at them and say, hey, what they do defines the generation, and these other two coming out before or after, okay, Xbox 360 might be the first gen blank because it came out before Wii, but still, when Wii comes out, yeah, then those systems around it, that's the next gen. People don't look at it that way, right? Whatever. The whole generation thing, you're never going to win everyone over, and some people already agree with you. So anyways, that's not the main point of the video. The main point of the video is I've had a blast with Nintendo Switch in the last 5 years. I think at this point, it's very close to being my favorite video game system ever. And by the end of its life, I have a feeling that it's going to win me over because there's the nostalgic part of me that, I'm 38, going back to when I was a kid, seeing games evolve from NES to SNES and Sega Genesis and PlayStation, and bam, Nintendo 64. Nintendo 64 hit me the hardest. 13-year-old me, or 12-year-old me getting to play it for the first time, 13-year-old me having an N64, and that just mind-blown thing. And every franchise that I loved, Mario, boom, Star Fox, boom, Zelda, boom, Donkey Kong, boom, all being in 3D, it was an incredible time. And we, that kinesiology major in me that graduated in 2006 with my Bachelor of Science degree, the martial artist in me, having Wii as a motion technology platform, very significant. So going back and looking at these and looking at their software libraries, looking at Nintendo Switch, looking at how it revitalized gaming yet again, what it offers from that hardware software standpoint, the output of games, the quality of games, the level of commitment that Nintendo has from a first party standpoint, the DLC, the affordable NSO plan, expansion pack, and how they're releasing Mario Kart 8 DLC, the value that you're getting with 48 more courses for $25 or bundled in with NSO expansion pack, how the plans work, and how you're getting coins for just buying games, like you're already getting a discount back that then could go into digital rewards or physical rewards like cool Metroid Dread posters and stuff like that, and Age of Calamity, acrylic pieces, the software, the hardware, the Joy-Con color variation, the Pro Controller variation, which I wish there were more colored Pro Controllers, honestly. Keeping things fresh with like a DS Lite 2 years in, an OLED model 2 years in, maybe a Pro or a Plus 2 more years in, and then, Nintendo Switch 2. Probably when Nintendo Switch 2 comes out, they will hopefully continue supporting the base Nintendo Switch, releasing software internally for a couple of more years so that you have these heavy hitters come out on the base Nintendo Switch with this install base of like 170 million, and this 20-40 million selling Nintendo Switch 2, showing significant improvements in hardware, software, graphics, performance, but these games run differently, but you capitalize on that giant user base and that growing base, and then eventually you stop developing for Nintendo Switch. You maximize more of that Nintendo Switch 2 hardware. Maybe third parties, smaller companies, indies are still developing on both, and that's what I'm saying. Nintendo Switch 210 million, not too unimaginable. But yeah, being a part of the launch, pre-launch with Nintendo Switch, being a part of that Nintendo Switch in Unexpected Places tour. It was John Cena, me, it was my friend David. We were at Nintendo Switch in Unexpected Places in California. We got to play video games together. It was a lot of fun. Got to be a part of the 2 commercials. So biased in terms of liking it from that perspective. My son, having memories of him playing Wii U with me, but him really getting into gaming with Nintendo. Nintendo Switch, I should say. Nintendo Switch coming out just 14 days before my daughter's birthday. My daughter's birth, I should say. So that all wrapping in there. Still being relevant 5 years in. The foreseeable future looking really strong with 2022 and beyond. Whew. There's recency bias and nostalgia bias. And it's kind of difficult sometimes to say what's the best, what's my favorite movie, game, etc. Console. The fact that we've got respect to the past with N64 controller support, NES, Super NES, Sega Genesis controller support. New games coming out. Wii ports, Wii U ports, new software. Good pricing, good medium. Nice to have cartridges back. Pretty cool. So much of it makes me say yeah, it might already be my favorite system ever, but I think it's going to if it isn't already. Yeah. That was a fun 45-minute deep dive on Nintendo Switch as it celebrates its 5th anniversary. Thank you so much for watching with me. I look forward to hearing your comments below. What were your favorite Nintendo? Let's see, we get some dual screen action here. Where we got my camera here and camera here, and you could see me in both. Yeah, something like that. It's kind of hard to play with the reflection and stuff. Like, what's this hand doing? What's this hand doing? Are we almost there? I'm trying to get the perfect shot. Shouldn't be that hard, right? Something like that, okay? Something like that. There we go. We got three of me on screen at once. Have a good one, everyone. Happy anniversary to Nintendo Switch. Thank you for 5 awesome years, Nintendo. I can't wait for many more memories with you at E3. Thank you for always making me feel welcome and for bringing this beauty to the world. To Charles Martinet, Doug Bowser, Shuntaro Furukawa, Reggie Fils-Aimé, everyone at Nintendo, Mr. Shigeru Miyamoto, Koji Kondo, Gil Ruda, the former Kit and Krista from Nintendo that are now doing their own Kit and Krista podcast, Nate Bildorf and Rich Amtower, lots of friends along the way, lots of people that I greatly value and respect and appreciate their time, Mr. Ichi Aonuma, everybody at Nintendo. Thank you so much for being awesome. Thank you so much for making great games. Here's to the rest of Nintendo's future. Mr. Iwata, I hope you're proud of what this system was. And thank you also for having the vision and seeing this too. I'm proud of what you did during your time with Nintendo. I'm proud of the leadership that you brought forth and gave to people like Masahiro Sakurai. And for that matter, Mr. Sakurai, thank you for being kind and for also your dedication to Smash Brothers. And really just, this is a sign-off love letter. Thank you, farewell, but not, a long time farewell. Just farewell for the video if you're watching this from Gale Network to all of you at Nintendo watching, fans, friends alike from the industry, whomever sees this. Here's to Nintendo Switch. Have a good one. Bye.